Okay, here we are. Um, oh, we've got the Norvil back again. Okay, so what's happened is with the Norvil, if you remember, we had a problem with the sprag bearing making a horrible noise when we pressed the starter and not engaging. And we realised that was down to bad lubrication of the sprag bearing. So we weren't sure what oil or whatever to use because the trouble is this primary chain case is running dry because it's got a belt drive conversion. Ironically, it's running dry because this, of course, is a Mark III and they don't tend to leak oil. The reason you would probably want it to run dry is to stop it leaking because some of the earlier models, as we well know, can leak quite a bit from the primary chain case, whereas a Mark III doesn't. A, it's got better sealing. It's proper screws to go in, and B, the gearbox doesn't move at the back, and so the oil seal behind the clutch is much more effective than the earlier models because the primary chain is adjusted through a hydraulic adjuster rather than by moving the gearbox backwards and forwards. Okay, but it does run dry, and I was thinking, well, I could actually just put oil in it because I think that it'll probably work okay. The problem with putting oil in is the belt. Now, there are different types of belt, and most of them are okay to run in oil. But I'm not sure about this one. I must look up the reference number. There's some reference numbers. I'll look it up and see whether we could run it in oil. The clutch, I know, is fine to run in oil, and obviously the sprag bearing would love it if it ran in oil. But there are different types of belt, and it could be, because it's designed to run dry, that it could be just a dry belt. My T160, that has belt drive, and that has to run in oil because the primary chain case shares the oil with the engine. You can't not run them in oil, and that works perfectly. Anyway, but I'm not doing that because when they built this, they didn't put any oil seals in, like where the wires go out for the alternator through the back of the casing. I'll get my camera in the right place. There, just sort of there, you can see the wire goes through from the alternator. There's no oil seal, so the oil will just pour out. So we'd have to rebuild the whole primary chain case to put that seal in. I wish they put it in really, but never mind, they didn't. So that we could use oil. So we've been back in touch. So anyway, yeah. So I rebuilt it, and we decided, well, obviously the original oil wasn't working because that's why it stopped working in the first place. Whatever was on that sprag bearing. So a couple of people got in touch, and so I put in a very light oil WD-40, and that worked great for a couple of weeks. And now it stopped working again. So we've been back in touch with Norvil. They said, "Oh no, you don't want to use WD-40. You only ever want to use this Morris lubricants, semi-synthetic chain lubricant." So that's what we're going to do. The problem to my mind is that was what was on there in the first place, and the whole reason we had the problem was because it stopped working. But of course, that oil had been on there for 10 years. Because if you remember, this bike had been bought brand new and then parked up for 10 years, didn't turn a wheel. So let's hope that goes on and it works, at least say for 5 years or something like that, at least longer than a couple of weeks than the WD-40 did, because of course that probably just dried up. I haven't taken it apart yet. Anyway, that's what we're going to do. So rather than run it in oil, and rather than try and use a different lubricant, we're going to use the lubricant recommended by Norvil. And obviously, after 10 years, it stopped working. But let's hope that it at least lasts for a few years. So that's the plan. I'll start the bike up in a minute, and you can listen to that sprag bearing, failing to lock. But yeah, so we've got my Commando over here. But on the bench, we've got a T160 that I'm working on for somebody. So I haven't got the bench. So we're going to be groveling around on the floor a bit. But all I'm going to do is, like we did before, we're going to take the alternator and that off so we can get to the sprag bearing, give it a clean, spray it with the chain lube, and put it back together, and hopefully it'll work for a while. At least, you know, I don't know, when I said 5 years, I don't know, a year, couple of years, that'd be better than 2-3 weeks, or not working at all, which is what it was when we got it. Okay. So yeah, just give me a minute. I'll get things set up. We'll start the bike up. You can, well, I'll press the starter. You can listen to that sprag bearing. Then we'll take it all apart and put it back together and see how we're doing. Okay, so we have set up the I've set the video up so that I'm going to press the starter button and we can listen to that sprag bearing and see about it failing to engage. Yeah, that's it, failing to engage. Every so often it catches. And more often than not it doesn't. So it's about 50-50 at the moment. So yeah. So we're going to take it apart now and try spraying the oil on, the new oil, and see if that gives us, we want obviously 100% all the time.